All right, so today we will be working on some additional ideas, some compositing. We're going to start to talk about what that is, compositing, and we're going to go over camera raw files, and we have some of those that we can download from the website. Kind of, and the advantages of photographing raw if you can, based upon your camera, or if you're you're getting somebody to shoot photos for you, you'll probably want them to shoot raw. So we're going to go through some of that and why that's really going to be beneficial to you. And then we're going to get into some basic compositing ideas and starting to deal with some smart objects. So we're going to get there, and we're going to introduce some new tools as we go. But I think we're to a point where we're about ready to start to put things together, start to make some things. Hopefully you're getting pretty familiar with the tools at this point, and we're going to start to create some awesome images with it. And hopefully also too, you had some time to work on the girl, the girl from Italy, cleaning that up, doing some cloning tools to get rid of some of the we'll just say the clutter in the background, and also using the healing brush or direct spot healing brush to clean that up. Because again, that's going to be an important aspect of what we're doing, is kind of touching up pictures and images as we go through Photoshop. So let me get my share going. Again, if something comes up, just chime in, leave a little notice here in the chat, and we'll get going to it. On the website, I added this introduction to compositing, and we're going to go through a fair amount of what they're doing over the next few days, but I wanted you to work on that. And then also we had this week was work on that girl from Italy that I was just speaking of. So hopefully you've done that. Again, I'm not grading that. I just want you to work on that to get comfortable with it. And if you have problems or questions, by all means, please let me know so we can work through those. That way you're kind of keeping up, right? So today I'm going to start with a couple of the two raw files we have in here. I'm going to click those, and it's going to want to download because they're raw. They're not a JPEG where you click and you see it. It's downloading those to my computer into my downloads, and I'm just going to look and see they're still loading up here. Got a minute or two left for those to come down. So one thing you'll first notice with raw files is they're big, meaning their file sizes are quite large. Why? Because when we're photographing with raw, we're collecting a lot more data. So when we shoot a JPEG, it takes, we'll use my hands here, it's collecting this much data from the image that it's seeing, the sensor. With raw, it's collecting like this much out. It's like so much it's off the board. So with a raw file, it's collecting a lot more data. There's a question there, Mark, it looks like, yes.
Yeah, so is raw technically a type of resolution, or?
It's a type of file.
Oh,
so yeah, it's a type of file that the camera can capture. The funny thing is you can't save raw, meaning I can't take a picture or make something in Photoshop, save it as a raw file. It can only be made raw when it's being captured as a photograph with the camera.
So then in principle, what would be like a difference between, like, say, an 8K photo and like a raw photo or something?
Well, 8K just means it's a higher resolution. Raw is not resolution. What it really is doing is, well, it is resolution, but it's really capturing data. And I'll show you in a second. So it's basically, if you think of raw as, take a normal JPEG, one you take with your iPhone or whatever, it's going to capture like this much of the visible light. Okay, you can see my hand. Or with raw, it's going to capture way out of here. It's going to be like twice as much. And I'll show you that in a second as I open the files up, as to how much and what the difference is between these two. And these have a file that says VNG. That's because I'm shooting with Nikon, and that's the raw code that's put on the back for a Nikon. If you were shooting Canon or Sony, it would be different. Okay. And the new iPhones and so forth, they're going to be able to start to shoot RAW also, which is going to give you more data information. So again, the problem, well, it's not a problem, but the thing about RAW files is they're very, very big. Okay, so JPEG captures so much, now RAW captures this, but with that larger amount of information that it's capturing, it's much, much bigger file size. So you can see these pictures are 5 and 9 megs respectively. So I'm going to open those up so we can take a look at them. And you're going to see when it opens up, it does a little bit differently. So here's the girl with the clone. Hopefully you guys have been working on that. Let me close her out. Let's save it for now. And then so I'm just going to close these out because we don't need those. These are some of the pictures we probably were working last time. And we'll close the iceberg for now. So I'm going to open up those 2 RAW files. And I know they're in my downloads that came in here. And they got that weird kind of extension. So it's not PDF, it's not JPEG. It's like, what was it weird? So one is, it's not a PNG, one is a DNG. Okay. And then what was the other? Was a PNG. So yeah, let me show you what this will be a good example. So here's a preview of that picture. All right. So here's a preview of the one RAW file. Look, it's Yosemite. It's cool. You can see it. Here's the other one. Black. Well, it's not really black. What it is a picture of the night sky in Joshua Tree, which I shot RAW. So if you're starting to, if you ever want to go take night star photography or night photography, RAW is by hands down the way you should be doing it, because there's so much data. So I'm going to open this up, and you're going to see it opens up a little bit different interface. So I'm in Photoshop, but it opened it up into this kind of different screen. It's basically the RAW formatting screen. Okay, so it's a lot of this stuff will look quite familiar to you, and it looks like you're here. You're going to go, I can see it's not black anymore. That's because I've opened it before. Let me try to reset this to. Let me give me a second here. I'm just going to.
Beautiful picture.
What's that?
It's a beautiful picture.
Thank you. Well, I want to take it back to, see if I can get it back to where it was in the beginning. I never do take it back, so that's why I'm looking here, because I tend to never undo what has already been done. But one more time to open it. All right, I'm going to just fake it out so you'll see what it looked like. Okay, so this is how it opens up. Okay, from when the first time I opened it, it's basically, it looks black, but there's stuff there. I know it's there because I took the pictures. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go through some of these, and you're going to notice a lot of these things are things we've already seen in Photoshop: exposure, highlights, shadows, vibrance, saturation, but it's all here on one kind of screen. And I'll show you how we can access this with other images. It really kind of makes our life a little bit easier. So let me get this brightened up here. So as I'm moving, you can see I'm pulling up the exposure. I'm going to pull up the whites and pull up the shadows. I'm just basically right now just kind of going through figuring out what I need to do to get this picture to come out. Okay. And what it is it's the night sky. It was a photo, was 25 seconds long. Okay, so obviously I'm using a tripod with this. It was f4 was the aperture. It was shot at 12 millimeters, the lens. It was 12 to 24 millimeter. millimeter, and it was an ISO of 100, meaning the film speed or the speed was basically 100. So it's going back into the days of photography. So what I'm doing right now is just kind of bringing it up. So initially, it was black, right? There was really nothing there. Well, it looked like nothing, but underneath of it all is this stuff that the camera captured. So the sensors on the camera are quite sensitive, and they can take, and literally I could play with this and I can get this almost where it looks like it's daylight for that matter, because the camera captures so much of the light. And what your job is as a designer, a photographer, is to start to figure out how do you want this, right? I mean, this is too much, but there's something in between. There's somewhere in between that I can play with this, where I can get the bright whites and the darks to be in a happy medium, and get the look and feel I want of the sky and how it really was at night. So as you're sitting out there at night, your eye will adjust to the darkness and will start to see a lot more. Okay, and you'll start to see the skies. And this is this dotted thing over here. This is a jet flying across the sky. So you can see it's kind of the blinking of the light. That's why there's a little brights and darks. Okay, and that's something I'm like, okay, it's there. I don't want that. And that's where we're going to use the spot healing brush. Once we get into Photoshop, we're going to be able to pull that out and get rid of that, because it's cool, but it's not helping with my composition. Okay. So right now I'm going to just kind of play with it a little bit more. I'm getting rid of some of the contrast. You see it mutes it out there, but I want to brighten that up a little bit. Okay, I don't want too much the highlights. Just looking here. So it's good to go back and forth with your I will call it your sliders, to see what it's going to do. So this is highlights down, this is highlights up. And what this bright spot is actually light coming from the Palm Spring area down the mountain from where Joshua Tree is. So I'm going to pull it down. It's there. I'm not going to be able to get rid of it all, but I just want to kind of lessen it a little bit. And then we have the shadows. I don't want to pull that too much. If I pull it all the way up, you can see it starts to get very grainy. I really start to see the grains, and that's too much. So I'm going to pull that back. So we've got the shadows, but we're not pushing it too much. And then the whites. See, there we go. Make it so bright it looks daylight and washes out the sky, but you can see all that texture and detail that's in the landscape there. It's all captured. If it was a JPEG, it wouldn't capture that. And if it did, you couldn't adjust it. You wouldn't be able to see it quite well. So I'm going to pull this down a little bit. I want to keep the Milky Way in there, but I don't want it so there. And I'm in the blacks. I'm looking at that. Go up a little bit with that. No. We'll go there. So we'll go with this. It's kind of a silhouette kind of feel. I'm going to pull the saturation up a little bit and the vibrance up a little bit. Again, it's kind of a back and forth. You're kind of playing, okay, black's up, vibrance up. And I can come back into other areas here where we have the curves. And we talked about curves where we can just kind of bump the whole thing up and down. Okay, and we can play with our curve levels to get them where we want. A little bit more saturation in there. That's the basics there. We did detail. I'm going to do a little noise reduction, and that's going to kind of get rid of some of that mess. I'm going to soften a little bit. So you watch the noise reduction. So as I pull it back down, you see there I got a lot more stars, but it's a lot, we'll say it's pixelated, right? You can start to see the dots, and it gets grainy, as they say. So I'm trying to reduce that a little bit. If I go too far, you'll see it kind of, it'll soften it all up. It makes a kind of really nice, soft kind of wash on there. So I want to keep some of the stars in there, but I want to get rid of a little bit of it.
Quick question.
Yes.
How do you read that graph on the top right of your screen?
These are the colors, and these are wherever here. This means it's this is dark and this is light on the other side. So basically, there's not a lot of light, and this is kind of showing you where those colors are in there. So it's kind of just kind of a visual representation of that. So if you go back to the curve, you can see that in here. It's the same kind of pattern is up top here. So it's just a visual way that you can start to kind of see it, watching them move. You see that the lights get lighter and the darks get.
So it like helps you prioritize certain colors.
Yeah. And it's just a visual way to go, okay, where am I right now? If you look at it, you're going, okay, I'm really dark. So I got to obviously add some lights, and you can kind of see how far you're going to keep that. So it's just kind of it's more of a visual way of working. And there's some people just totally work you could really do it completely mathematically like this. Okay, I know because I'm the visual kind of person, but you can see where we can play with that curve. So at this point, we're bringing the darks, more color, saturation. Up here, we make them really bright. So you can kind of play back and forth to fine tune the lighting that's going on. So it's not just a straight curve. It could be kind of a more of a blend. Does that make sense? So it's really kind of playing with that idea perfectly. It's kind of like the light goes all the way across. There's not major bumps, but right now we're getting major bumps because we've still got a lot of darkness over here.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so and then down here, there's the coloring. Okay, so we can literally adjust the shade and the shadow. I'm not going to mess with that here on this. Optics. This is a vignetting. This is kind of the darkness around the edges. See, I can kind of make that white or I can go dark. Okay, I'm not going to mess with that too much. And then there's just a little distortion. See if I can pull that all the way up. That's distorts it in, this distorts it out. And you, again, some of it, sometimes we want to do that because of the lens. Okay, the lens had a lot of twists and turns, meaning it was, I'm using a wide angle lens, so it's pretty, we'll say it's a little bit distorted. We'll get it back to kind of nothing here, 0, so you can see. It's kind of twisting thing, and it's hard with nature to see it, but if you had a building, you could definitely see it. So you might want to play with a distortion to kind of make that building more straight up and down. Okay, you don't get that curve that you're getting because of the lens. And if I did something like this, I would come back once I opened it in Photoshop and crop it to get rid of this space out here where the photo's been twisted. I'm going to put that back to 0. I'm not going to worry about geometry right now. We just did there's a vignetting. You can add a complete vignette. It's a little bit, you can adjust the vignetting here. Okay, you can do it higher, lower, wherever. I'm going to put that to 0. I don't want any vignetting at this point. You can add grain. See if it's going to show up here. Push it all the way up. It's hard to see, but basically it's adding the grain in. Many times you don't want the grain, but sometimes you need to add grain. So this is putting it all over. We'll pull that back to 0. And then the calibration, we're pretty well set here, but you can make up your own calibration based upon the scenery. And you can see here, I can quickly do that shift. Right now, it's kind of at a purple tint, but I can kind of here just kind of pull that shadows, and now we got more of a blue sky. Okay, so you can kind of make a total overall adjustment with that. And again, now it's going to play with individual colors within there. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is kind of, you're looking at what? I'm trying to look at maybe building out the clouds here, and that's the Milky Way kind of an area. I'm going to keep it a little bit blue. People think night sky and it's blue, and it kind of is. I mean, it's dark, right? It's a little purple, it's a little blue. It's definitely not green, but again, you're doing something compositing. You may want to do some kind of cosmic stuff, and it's not purple or pink magenta, but again, you get some really awesome effects, right? Depending on what you're trying to do. So I'm going to keep it a little bit more realistic here with that. And then I'm going to put open. Now, when I get down to open, you can see it just is open, but there's an object or there's a couple options here. So when I click open, it says open as a normal object. Click to open without updating meta. And then we'll click it again. Open up. shift click to open as a smart object. So shift and click. And what am I doing with a smart object? A smart object allows me to come back and edit this later. Meaning if I open this as a smart object, it's going to bring in this image as a layer with all of these adjustments that I did in the raw file. But I'll be able to come back to this and make adjustments to it as a raw file. Okay, so it's really kind of a dynamic thing where with raw files, it keeps the information, but it doesn't, you can't save as it, but it will save the information that you change. So when I open this back up, even if I open this photo back up 2 months from now, it will come back to exactly what you're seeing here on the screen because it knows this is how I set it up last time. Okay, so I'm going to open as an object. That's what's saying a smart object. And it's going to bring it into Photoshop, the traditional Photoshop that we see. This is what we're used to. But you'll notice there's a little icon on the little icon on the icon, right? The picture here on your layer stuff. And that's telling me it's a smart object. Okay, so and if I double click on it, it's going to open it back up into Photoshop here. And then I could, make a change. They click OK. And it's going to update it and come back. And now it is here. Okay, so it's been changed. Double click again. It'll come back and I can now change it back to whatever color I want. We'll keep it to blue. Click OK. And it's going to update it again. Again, it's keeping it, the resolution is pristine. It's as good as it can get. And it's what we call a smart object and allows you to go back and adjust things. So I'm going to pull in another picture just so we can kind of see that. I'm going to open up. Actually, let me place it and do this. File. I'm going to place linked. I'm going to grab a picture that we have here in our images we've been using. Desktop. Class pics. And we have her. We know the girl. Yeah, no, like damage. Okay, so here she is, and it's just a JPEG. You can see the difference between the icons. Okay, now I can make this a smart object by coming up here to it's linked. I'm sorry, let me just pull in. We embed her instead. We'll do this instead. I'm just copying, go back over here. Okay, so I put this image in. See, this one, it won't let me do it because it's a link file, and that's okay. I'm going to just ignore that for now. I put this in, and I want to make this a smart object. So I'm going to come here, convert to smart. So you can see there's no icon there, but I want to change it. Now, why would we want this to be a smart object? Let me explain why. Because if we double click on it, it opens it up in a new, basically a new file in Photoshop. And you can see it did this layer 1 PSB. I can make all kinds of adjustments here if I wanted to. And it will come back to it. So I'm going to do some like really crazy, and these again are, let me do this. I'm going to do a color, do black and white, because you'll see it, right? There's a complete black and white here. And we've got the clipping path coming down. So boom, it's black and white. And I'm going to hit save. And watch, it's going to bring it back into my file as a black and white file. Okay. Now I'm working, I'm going, okay, you know what? I didn't want that black and white. I wanted color again. If I double click on it, it takes it back over here. You can turn off that layer because it's basically, it's like a file within the file that I'm working with. I hit save. And it's going to come back over here and it's going to be updated to the new version. Okay. it's not, when I did this smart layer, it did not affect the original picture, right? So if I make this go black, the black and white version, turn it back on, okay, and I hit save, it didn't change the original picture that I opened. I can come back here and put open and find, you'll see here's the picture, content one, JPEG. It's still in color, okay? And in fact, if I open this, it's not gonna have any layers on it because it's still the JPEG. So what it's doing is by making these smart objects, I'm able to play with the picture and make changes that aren't destructive to the originals, okay? And the reason this is important is that as we start to do compositing, what we're doing is compositing is basically bringing different pictures together. Okay, so we're not just using one photo and cleaning it up or cloning things out. We are now at this point where we're going to start to bring in different pictures and combine them to kind of make a new thing. Okay, so it's not just, in this case, taking out the girl from the picture. What we're going to do is actually maybe bring in more trees or something like that, where we're bringing in ultimately different photos. And we're going to try to make those adjustments as we go, the color and clarity and all those kind of things. So as we start to work, we're trying to kind of balance things out so it will work. So if I click there, you can see it went away and it's still here, but and you see it got away from my tab, so it's not. But if I double click again, it opens back up in that tab and you can see it still has that adjustment layer on it. Turn that off. And basically what I'm doing when I hit save, it's just saving it back to my file over here. And here you can see that file. Okay, so smart objects allow you to kind of make changes to it. It also will let you make changes. In this case, I'm going to bring in, let me do this. I'm going to open her up in here, contents, so you can see. So now it's back in. It's just a file, separate layer. It is not. It's. Oh, it came in as a smart layer, didn't it? Okay. So let me turn that off. I don't want this. I want to bring in so you can start to see without it being a smart layer. So I'm going to open up, just open it. Basically a whole new file right there. So I'm going to get rid of that one. We don't need that one. When we start to deal with filters and effects, which we haven't done, this is kind of a new area, and there's a bunch in here. As we do these filters and effects, it becomes basically a destructive thing. It's not a non-destructive process when it's just a layer. So I'm just going to copy the layer as we always would, setting up, turn that off. And I want to add, let me just go something crazy that you can see. Stylized. We're going to make it tiles. Okay, so I'm going to add tiles to this picture. And I'm just going to say, okay, it's going to work it up. And you can see it chopped it up into little tiles, almost like a puzzle piece. Okay, and you see there's nothing here that lets you go back and change it. So it did that. And if I move ahead, it's kind of there and there's no way to get rid of it. It's kind of part of the layer. And that's kind of why we make these duplicates in case. Okay, but if I'm over here, and it's a smart object, and I go to the same filter, tiles up here, it did it, but you'll see it added here as what they call a smart filter. And if I don't want the tiles, I can turn it off. Okay, you can turn off the whole smart filter. If I want to change it, I can double click here, and it's going to bring up the parameters of that, the blend mode. Okay, so I can make those changes here with it. All right, so I'm going to turn that one off. I'm going to add in another filter. These are kind of swirl. So it's going to add this swirl. It kind of shows you a preview of it in this case. I'm going to hit OK. And it added this swirl effect. Well, I'm going to turn the tiles off because I don't want them in there. I just want the swirl. And it's like, oh, okay, it's cool, but it's maybe too much swirl. I can double click on it and come back up here and adjust the swirl the other way. Or I want to make it totally crazy the other direction. Click OK, and it made it. Whereas if I'm with the picture over here and I add the swirl, it became part of the photo, part of the layer. I can't go back and change it. Okay, and you see the tiles are on there. It becomes an uneditable kind of effect. All right. So by keep making things smart objects, we're able to go back and work in a non-destructive way and make changes later down the line. Very much like we've done over here, where we've done our adjustment layers. Okay, and we've done the effects. So the whole point is we can come back and change things down the line. Okay, right now, I can't change this. And in fact, to go back to the tiles, I can maybe look at my history and go back. But if I've gone ahead many, many steps, it will become obliviated into the history. It won't even show up. Or over here, you can see all my layers and all my history, but in my layers panel, I have it. So if I don't want the tile or the swirls, I'm going to turn it off and I'm back to where I was. Okay. And that's, again, the power of Photoshop. It's really kind of working with us to allow us to be creative and experiment and try things. And if it doesn't work, that's cool. We just turn it off because we're using the smart objects. Okay, so many, many times, one of the first things you're going to want to do is make a smart object out of your layer. Okay, and to do that, you go under filter. Okay, now up here also, you'll notice there says a camera raw filter. So these are other filters effects. So this is a JPEG that I opened. Okay, but if I click on the camera raw filter, and I pull it up with the JPEG. Let me just cancel this. Let me turn it off. Let me get rid of the swirls and such. Just keeping with it. Here's my, okay. So I've got the picture, and I'm going to open up the camera raw filter. And you'll see it brings up very much like the other, it brings it up exactly the way the raw filter was. So what we're looking at now is we're looking at a JPEG that I can adjust and make changes to in a similar fashion as a raw file. Now, what's the advantage here working with it and working with a raw file? Exposure, contrast, light, black, dehaze, all that. Guess what? I can touch it right away. If I'm over here, okay, I got to go through different things, right? I got to do all the little effects. Well, in this case, I can make all of those changes quickly, and I'm using them as a smart filter, so I can change through and see what I'm going to get right away. I'm going back and forth, just seeing what I'm getting. The texture, the clarity, dehaze. See, the clarity and dehazing is going to sharpen it. It's going to bring out the color and bring it up. Okay, so if you don't want that, you can pull that down, right? That's going to dehaze, and clarity is going to soften things. Okay, and texture kind of, it's kind of a newer thing, the texture. It basically makes things a little bit crisper. Let me pull this up here. Now, I don't want the blue tint. I think it's a little bit too blue. So I'm going to play with the temperature here and warm it up a little bit. It's getting a little warm in the back, but we can adjust that later. Okay. Again, it's a hard picture because there's a lot of shadow in the foreground and a lot of light in the background here. I think we're pretty close on that. I'm going to come back down here to the color mixture. I want to make the magentas a little bluer. I'm trying to get, I want to tone it down a little bit. Tone the reds down a little bit. And come back into the curves. And I want to bring the reds down just a hair. You see, it barely moved it at all, but it made a difference, right? I can see up, red, down, getting a little bit more of that blue. And again, I can pull out where I want those reds to be. Don't get rid of too much. Just kind of tweaking it a little bit. All right, and I can come here and this kind of gives you the before and after. So I can see my changes. I'm gonna click OK. And it's adding that effects to the, so it made that change here to this layer. Now, I'm cool, I'm happy, but let's say I want to make another change. All I got to do is click on it again, and it's going to open back up in that camera raw, and I can come back here and say, okay, I want to make it yellower. Boom, click OK, and now it's going to add that yellow effect to it. Okay, so the camera raw filter will, I hope, become one of your best friends, because it allows you to make these complete big universal adjustments to your photos. And in this case, because it's a smart filter on a smart object, it's non-destructive. And we can come back and forth and make changes all day long to get to where we want. If we're using a raw file, I don't need to do that because it's already there, right? So if I want to change this raw file, which I know is raw, I just double click and it opened back up. And it really is the raw file that I'm making adjustments to in this case. Just exaggerate so you can see it. I'll make it purple. Okay. And it's making a change to the actual raw file. Okay. And then again, if I don't want it, I can step it back, double click it, and it opens back up. So in this case, I'm adding kind of the smart filter, the camera raw filter to a JPEG. In this case, it is a raw file, so I'm using the camera raw filter whenever I double click it. I don't need to add it to it. And in fact, I don't think it will let you do it. Well, it will. It's kind of crazy. Let me see what it does here. So it added a camera raw filter to the raw file. It's kind of crazy. Okay. I would never do this because it's kind of like, it just makes the file more confusing. I could just go to the raw file itself because it's a smart object and make the changes without adding this smart filter effect. Okay, and I'm going to delete the filter and clear it. That. Okay, so we're back to where we were. So camera raw is awesome. And then when you start to deal with the camera raw with the smart filters, it gets incredibly cool. And if you add a smart, make a regular JPEG, we'll say in JPEG meaning a normal photo, into a smart object, it allows you to add these filters and effects and still be able to modify and adjust. And then the camera raw filter on top of everything, no matter whether you're using on top of a JPEG or an actual raw file, becomes incredibly, I don't want to say it, it really gives you a huge amount of opportunities. Okay, a lot of options. So I'm going to open up another raw file. So we saw really how bad this picture was. It was black. Well, it looked black, but it really wasn't black because I knew when I took that picture that all that information was being captured. And when the camera actually shows you, it kind of gives you a quick preview like this through the viewfinder or through the where you look at it saved. But it's just for a quick second. It's kind of interpreting it. But I know that all that data is in there. And like I said, in here, we've got this airplane. So let me just get rid of that real quick. So I'm going to make a new layer. And I'm going to do my spot healing. I'm going to zoom in. Okay, and you can see it's pixelated, but that's okay. It's the night sky. And I'm just going to kind of go along here. And what I'm doing is get rid of that jetliner. And because I'm doing it again as a new layer, and I know it's only adjusting the layer below. Okay, I cleaned it up. So here's with the jet in there, and here's with the jet taken out. Okay, so again, one little quick click, you can see it's working like any normal file that we started working with by making this kind of adjustment layer on top and within there doing my spot healing brush. Okay, And likewise, I can do a new layer and do clones and do all that kind of stuff too. So there's really nothing different with how the layer works. It's just the fact that I can come back and make these adjustments. And in this case, these adjustments with like the raw file are incredibly complex, and I can do it all at once, right? I'm not having to open up this object and then go, okay, file, let me do an adjustment layer for color, and then one for curves, and then one for brightness. Boom, I've got it all done here. And I can just simply click and open this again and make that immense amount of changes. And I can do it quickly, right? I mean, the whole point of working is to work, in this case, work efficiently. So you can get the stuff done and you can move on and do other creative things. And you don't want to have to spend 2 hours doing something that you can do here in about 2 minutes of adjusting. And then coming back and go, okay, I want that or I don't want that. Change, okay? It's quick, boom, it's done. I like that better. Click okay. It's adding it to the file and now it's changed, okay. And then back over here, again, I can't do anything with this, right? I'm stuck. I can't undo it. All I can do is kind of turn it off and start over. And that's why we did our copy. So I can go back to it if I need to. I can go back to my original. Okay, so not a great way to work because now I have to go back. And let's say I did a good color correction. I got some good, blending modes. I did some good cloning out or masking. Now it's all kind of muddled together in this one layer, and it's really basically impossible to work with. Okay, so you want to kind of work in a smart way. Let me close that. I'm going to open up that other raw file so you can see downloads. We had the Yosemite one. So even with a daylight picture, I want to show you, because obviously with that mountain picture, it was pretty obvious. Okay, so here is the original picture. You can kind of see it's all preset, and the temperature was over here. And what I'm going to do is just kind of bring it up. So you're going to go, well, what is it? Well, there's a lot of light and a lot of color and a lot of things going on down in the grass area here that aren't quite obvious with the JPEG version. Whereas with the raw file, I can kind of bring that out. So I'm going to start to bring up the shadows a little bit. And I'm pushing it all the way so I can see what it's doing, where the shadows are affecting, and they're affecting the grass. I'm bringing those up. I want to bring, let me see the whites. I'm going to bring the whites down actually, because the whites are up in the sky and I want to get the focus back onto the clouds and the rocks, and then the blacks. I'm looking at that. Pull that up just a hair. Texture, you can see here it got really blurry, kind of very, I don't know, pinky look. It's got really sharp, so that's too much. I'm gonna pull it up just a hair. Clarity, you can see there's a fuzz. Here it is sharper. I'm gonna sharpen just a hair. And then dehazing, there's there, and this is haze. So I'm gonna add a little dehaze. What it's gonna do is bring up the colors. You can see what it's doing. It's adding more blues in there, okay? And a little bit more vibrance. There's the vibrance, no vibrance, 100% vibrance. It's too much. Okay, so I'm going to kind of bring in a little bit, and then the saturation. I'm going to pull that up a little bit more. I want some heavy saturation in there. And then I want the sky a little bluer. Hi.
Question.
Yes.
Typically, do you start with the vibrance before you hit the saturation, or does it not matter?
No, it doesn't matter. It's just kind of where you go first. I mean, if I pull the vibrance down, you can see it's kind of pulling it away, but it's not, there's a difference. So let me just pull the saturation down. The saturation goes to black and white if it's all the way down. Where vibrance, there's still color in there, right? There's still greens and there's still like a tint of blue up in here. And the rocks were kind of gray already. So it's just kind of working in a different area of the color. And this is where you can kind of look at they call this the histogram when we were talking about the curves. You can see what it's doing. Okay, you can see it's flattening out. It's getting that kind of more even color path. So you can kind of visually see what am I doing here. You can see it's pushing up the blues. Okay. And you can see here, look, everything went to black and white. It actually is a visual representation. 99% of the time, I'm not even looking at this. The way I work is just looking at the screen. Okay. So I'm kind of just playing back and forth here. And I just said I wanted a little bit more blue. So I'm going to come down to the mixer and I'm going to make my blues a little more saturated. And push the aqua up a little bit, pushing to see what it's doing. Make that a little bit more there. And let's pull up the saturation a little bit more with the blues. You can see I could push that way up a little bit too far. But you see also there's blues in the shadows. So it kind of got blue in the shadow. That's too much. But just trying to push it up a little bit. That goes a little bit. I'm just trying to, you know, give it a little more pop in there. And then we're going to click open. And we see that it opened it as a regular object. So you can see here it's not a smart object. And I just want to see if I convert this to a smart filters. Let me double click, it should take me back. No, so I don't want to do that. So I'm going to click cancel. So I didn't want to open it as a regular object here. I want to open it as a smart object. Click the wrong thing. So I'm going to close this layer. And oh, it did. No, it didn't. It opened it up. I just see it. Oh, it just opened it up as an object, right? Like a normal, like it would have been JPEG, which I didn't want. So I'm going to just close this. And you're going to go, no, 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 what happened? We did all that work. Yeah, I know, but if I open it back up again, watch. I open this layer, this JPEG or this raw file back up. It takes it back to where I was making those adjustments. So it kind of like basically saves for you as you're going. You can see all those adjustments were made. So as you're working a raw file, it basically embeds those changes into the file itself forever. Okay, so even if I come back to it 2 weeks from now, it's going to come back to where I just was. So however changes you make, it keeps it embedded in the raw file so you can make those adjustments. So I really want to open it up here as an object. So open it, when it says object, it should be open as a smart object. Okay, and they literally changed this button, I think in the last version or two of Photoshop. So here I am, and you can see I have a smart object. Again, if I want to make that change, I double click on it. It brings me back to the camera raw, and I can make those changes here. I may want a little more sunshine in there, a little more yellow, click OK. And it's going to make those adjustments and changes and bring it back. And now it's a completely editable file. And again, by having raw and shooting raw, even during the daytime, I'm allowing myself to kind of get in there and be able to kind of mess with the lights and the darks of the file. Okay, things that may have been missed. And again, now it's becomes a regular file that I can work with. I'm gonna just make a dupe real quick just to have. And then the last thing I want to kind of do today before we kind of get into a little bit more, we'll do a little bit more compositing ideas, is that replace the sky. We talked about the replace sky before. So it's edit, replace sky. And it's going to give me a preview in a second here. So it's adding those in. And what it's doing is it's also bringing in that color to the foreground. Okay. So I don't know if I want that's probably too much for the day. It's a little bit too, let me just play with the clouds. So maybe I decided, you know what, I get playing with the real clouds that were there were kind of goofy. Now this is kind of nice. Now I'm going to keep there. But I want to kind of enlarge it. So here's scale. I'm going to enlarge it a little bit. I want to kind of, and I can click and you can see you can kind of move your clouds around. All right, so I can literally reposition the clouds themselves in that picture. I'm just going to kind of sit. So what I'm doing is I want the light to come in top here and basically draw your eye down to the fall. So if we look at the top of the picture, we start looking things at the top right. We see these little puffy clouds. they point me down to the fall, which points me down, okay, to the whole picture. And then I can look at this is kind of a blend mode. It says multiply. What it's doing is bringing that color in to the foreground. And I can look at this here at the screen and see what that, so it lightened it up here, look like. Multiply, keeps the crispness there. And I can make adjustments to the color. Let me see if I push it up one way or the other. So what the computer is doing is it's trying to interpret what you have the sky and how the light should look on the picture. And you can see here, by pulling that color adjustment down, it really kind of, I'm kind of bringing in like more daylight. And these are kind of white puffy clouds that would work with the daylight. Okay, so that's there. I can come back in here and I can add a different mask in here if I want. Again, we can move things around. You can enlarge and output the new layers. What it's going to do is bring it into a whole new layer as I work. So click OK. And you see here, here's my sky. Okay, so it made a whole new layer of sky filters. So that's before, which was okay, but it's like you can see it's getting muddy, not quite as crisp. I got the puffy clouds, but here I got the same kind of puffy clouds, but I got a lot more definition to it. Okay. Now again, are we trying to be this, I don't know, we'll say National Geographic documentation photography? Maybe. And if we are, then we're going to want the clouds to be this way because that's the way they were the moment I took that picture. Okay. But if I'm trying to be, quote, artistic, or I'm trying to use this as some kind of, let's say we're doing a brochure for travel in California, this is probably going to look a little better, a little bit more dynamic. And we are true to the fact that this is Yosemite with the waterfalls, but we just kind of changed the clouds a little bit. Okay, and I think a little bit of the creativity there is I think is perfectly okay. Now I would let the editor of the publication know and say, look, I did a change. Here's my change to the sky. I love the foreground. This was all working, but the sky was getting a little bit muddy. So I popped in a new sky. What do you think? And then let them make the final decision. But I think as a designer, as an artist, as a photographer, I totally dig how these clouds are working here. And again, I'm totally able to make the adjustments. So if I go, okay, I need to make this a little bluer to match up. I can kind of put my color tint here. You can pull that up and I'll pull my exposure down a little bit and put my contrast a little bit and click OK. And so it made a little bit of subtle changes in there with that. Okay, so I just want to kind of, you can see it's not a lot, but it's subtle. Okay, and again, if it's not enough, I want more because it's a raw file and because it's a smart object. Come back here, click OK. You can see it darkened it all up. So here's how it was initially. You're going to go, wow, why come those look the same? Because it's a smart object, it makes those changes on all occasions that we have that smart object. Okay. If I didn't want that change to be done on all occasions, I can undo it, make it a smart object. So let me do this, pull this back up. And I want to, where do we turn that? I'm going to turn that off as a smart object. Oops. Smart object new layer or new copy. So it makes a new one. And you can export it. And I just want to convert to layers. Rasterize the layer. We'll make it normal. Okay, so if I rasterize it, it took off the smart object thing. So here, if I make a change to the smart object, we'll make it blue. You can see that. Boom, there's a difference. It's blue, but it didn't change here. Okay, because this one is no longer a smart object of that layer. Okay. If I want to make a copy of the smart object, I have to make a smart object here, come down to the drop down, and I'm going to make a new smart object via the copy. So do that. this is separate now. So if I make a change here, back to kind of where we were, it only did it on this layer, not this layer. Okay, this is still a smart object down here. Okay, but it's a new copy of a smart object. Okay, so the computer will activate them separately. Okay, and why? Well, I don't know. Maybe I want to make this here. Maybe I want to do a different blend mode. Okay, I want to play with that to kind of darken some things up or lighten some things. It's kind of really extreme here, but okay, we'll do that. So I want the grass to be really green. So here the green grass is kind of yellowish, and I'm just kind of want to push this crazy green stuff. So I'm going to work on this object, and I can actually do something like a smart layer or a mask, and I can literally I'm going to just use the paintbrush to paint out the object. Make a brush. So I'm literally just kind of painting out the mask here. I want the rocks to look right, but I don't want that. I want these kind of really crazy green down below.
How is it not picking up the sky when you?
Because this is a separate mask up here. See, there's a whole new mask built in here.
Okay.
See the mask going on? So because I'm between, it's not going to touch it. It doesn't matter. I mean, it is making a mask up here, but the problem is you don't see anything because it's already being covered up. If I look at my little template or my icon preview, I can see it's making black up there, but it's not catching it too much. And I'm going to soften this up even a little more. And I'm just going to just goof this off. It's obviously I'm just playing here, but I'm trying to show how we can play with one layer on top of another to kind of get these different effects. But it's all still editable. Okay, so we did this. Now we see there's some weird color down here, but we're like, okay, it's cool, but it's maybe too green. So I'm going to come back here to my smart object. Okay, and I'm going to bring it back. Okay, I want it blue. I want the green to be there, but maybe I'll just tint it that way. Purple. Just again, I'm looking at only the grass. I'm not worried about the rocks. And click OK. And now it changed it here. Okay, so we still have the rocks. We down here have where we bumped up the trees. And again, maybe that's still too much. So I can even do, play with a screen mode to kind of work it in. So that's there. I'm just looking to see where I can go. Not doing too much there with that. So again, we can play with the ooh, look at that, that's nice. All right, so we've taken out we'll say the yellow, the oranges in here. We've got the rocks where we want them, but we want to change the trees. So now we're changing the trees and stuff back to a green. And again, we're just using color overlay in the filter. Okay, so we're playing with multiple things at the same time to make the adjustments the way we want. And that's the thing with Photoshop. You're typically using like 15 different ways of doing things. So when I'm all happy here, now I'm going to save this as a JPEG. Okay, so I'm going to hit save. It's going to come up as a PSD. Okay, Photoshop. And we'll hit save. If I wanted to export this to use in printing or a website, then I'm going to do save a copy. and I can do the JPEG here. Okay, or I can do file and export, and it gives me some presets here, save for the web, export as. Let's open that up. And this gives me basically a preview of that. So if I'm going to do a JPEG, and it kind of shows me what that would look like. I'm just going to show you here if you can see it. I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so here is at a very poor quality JPEG, they call it. And then here is a great. See the difference? Look, I mean, you can dramatically see that. There, you can see the rocks here, and you can see the texture of the rocks. And over here, you can see it all became mud because we're just seeing big pixels. So if you save as a low quality JPEG, what it's doing is we're literally getting rid of the information. And I can look over here, it says 215 kilobits for the size. And if we do this, it's going to be a couple of megs, I'm sure, 4.9 megs. So it's, you know, literally 4.7 megs bigger, this file. But you can see the difference in the image quality. Okay, so I'm just doing an export as, and I can look at that here. If I saved it here, do a save as or save a copy and do a JPEG, I get the same kind of information. Where am I hiding here? Over here. Okay, and this is the best quality, right? So 100% quality as opposed to 0 quality. Okay, so it's very similar interface. It's just kind of giving you a little bit different ways of doing it. And then click OK, and it's going to save. Okay, so really just preference. How do I want to save it? Which one you feel like you can look at better? And now I have this as a separate JPEG. I also have it as a Photoshop file. So if, let's say, I wanted to, you know, maybe change the sky next time, I can literally turn that off again, go back to, you know, sky replacement, come up with a new sky, thinking. And again, remember, you can add your own skies in, all right? You can import your own stuff. So start taking pictures of the skies and stuff like that. So we're keeping that. And I'm gonna scale it down a little bit, not too much. I'm gonna pull it up so I want a little bit of that color there. Click OK. And now we have this sky, right? If I don't like this sky, go back to this sky. So I have two skies I can try from. There's the one, and there's my first one. Okay, so I can literally go back and forth and make these changes and modifications all day long if I want. Okay, and save. All right, questions on that? We'll cover quite a bit today. I think we'll get into some traditional compositing. We'll do that come next class, where we're going to basically bring objects together. So we're going to make this kind of crazy reality world. I would recommend watching the video over on the website here. She works with Adobe. She's really cool. And she basically will go through, in this case, they're adding this, she's making this water bottle appear on an iceberg. And I've got some similar objects that I've downloaded that I'll go through. And what I do is let me upload those to the website, my objects, so that way you can kind of play with those as we go through those next week in class. They're not the same as hers, but similar kind of ideas. Okay, so definitely think it's well worth looking at with that.
Look a little bit, you know, more yellow, I can do that, or I can make it look more blue. I can add brightness.
Oh, that's her. What is talking? Oh, you guys are all talking crazy. All right. Questions? Let me see if anybody came in late. Anybody come in late? Did I didn't get down attendance?
I came in late.
Corbin came in. I got two. Let's see here. Who else?
Thank you.
Corbin, is that the only one? Nina, I got you. Just double checking here. All right, questions as we're sitting here? I know I kind of went pretty.
Yeah, I've just got a kind of small thing. So when it comes to the raw files, is this a sort of common thing that like a lot of these sort of Canon type cameras have, or is it like only a specific sort of rare feature of higher end cameras? Like I'm just curious to know like how common of a feature it is.
It's a pretty common feature on I will say most middle to high end cameras. And you basically you'll save them that way. Grabbing my camera here. So this is my Nikon. And you'll actually be able to, when you go through on your menus on the back, in my case, menu, you can go through and make these adjustments on here to say I want to save. I save RAW and JPEG. And why do I do both? The JPEGs preview quicker. So if I'm looking through the folders, I can see them a little faster. Let me give you a share again. I'll show you. And let me just find a folder here. Too many folders. Okay, so the JPEG is a here, and then I have the RAW underneath. So you see the RAW like takes longer to load. It's the same picture, but this is the RAW format and this is JPEG format. So I do both more than anything, just so I can kind of look through it quickly when I'm trying to find photos, and not have to sit here and go wait that extra second. I mean, it sounds crazy, but that extra second makes a difference. Now, I'm making a lot of file size, right? This is 21 megs, and this one's 22 megs. You know, this is 4 meg. So I'm adding like a ton of stuff to my hard drives. But I guess I'm willing to give up space on my drives just so I can have that. And I'm always willing to give it up because I ultimately this is what I want. I want the RAW, because these are both the same picture, but I can, with the RAW file, open it up in Photoshop.
You just have more flexibility.
I have total flexibility, right? I can like change the exposure, right? I can do this with it. Where when I've opened up as a JPEG, I don't really have that option, right? So that's here, and then we open up the same picture as a JPEG. See, it's already dark, and now I got to duplicate it, and now I got to kind of do an adjustment, brightness, contrast on it. And go here, and I got to do this. So I can kind of do all of these things here with it. But again, I'm working with the image. It can only go so far. Okay. But if I had I made it a smart object, could convert to smart filters, which is making it a smart object. I can come to camera raw and I can make the adjustments here, but I'm faking it, right? It's kind of acting like a raw file, but it's not. So I can only push so far, and you can see the exposure got really bad. Where if I open up the same file here, I can push that that exposure way up. I'm way larger, and I can kind of get the details out. Whereas with the JPEG, I don't have those details because the JPEG captured this much and the raw file captured this much. So the raw file is capturing a lot more data, color, imagery, everything else.
Yeah, all right. And usually whenever we finish, I mean, regardless which one we start with, whether it's a JPEG or a RAW file, I'm assuming we always export to like JPEG or something like that.
Yeah, you're going to export it as a way that you can use it, because you can't really use a PSD. You can't really use a Photoshop file.
Okay, so we would never turn in like a RAW file or something like that, right?
No, because the raw file is you're basically, think of it as your negative. Okay, it's the negative for the camera. The negative doesn't change. Okay, but you can change how that negative is processed.
Okay, I see. It's like the original copy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So like when you're done, like whatever changes I make to this file, this raw file, it's still the raw file over here. it's still here.
Mhm.
This didn't change, but when I open it back up, it's going to show the adjustments that I made. See this little XMP file? That's basically the data that says I made changes to this file.
Mm.
That's the computer keeping the data that I made change. If I get rid of this, it's going to go back to default. But this little XMP is basically just a little bit of data that tells the raw file what to do when I open it again.
And that
Oh,
XMP
okay.
file doesn't really do anything for you. It's just
It's just the
there.
computer. It's the computer thinking.
Okay, so like say you
Mm.
did finish working on your raw file and you exported it, you could delete that XMP file.
You could,
Done. Yeah.
but you basically just kind of leave it because it's keeping the data the way you made the changes. If I get rid of this now, hold on. Let me do this real quick. I'm going to go back to the raw file here. I'm going to make this like crazy change so you'll see it. All right, there's blue. It's cool. Click OK. And it's making the changes actually to the raw file, which we don't see. And then I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to get rid of this little XMP. And I'm going to open this back up again. Just kind of open it as like a new time. See, it got rid of the blue because it didn't keep that. Had I canceled this. And I'm going to put this, if I put this back, it should put the blue back in. So let me come back over here. If I open up the file now, let's see if it puts the blue back in. Oops, it's going to do another program. Hold on. Click. No, it didn't. I thought it would. Maybe it unlinked it. Basically, that's data that the computer is using. So let's go. I don't know, I just leave them. It's not taking up any space. So if you see it, that's what it is. It looks like it doesn't matter. It should still stay there with that. So if you ever see those, it's basically tied through to the raw file with that. So I shoot both in my camera. It does this automatically because again, there's spots like underneath the bricks here. I can see it's really dark. I look at the JPEG, I can see it's dark. But if I open it up as a raw file, I can bring out that. I can pull that exposure up and I can brighten it. And sometimes you might want to play with the same picture twice at different exposures. One exposure for the building, and then I want to do another exposure down here for the steps. And you can see, look, there's a whole world underneath there. Okay, that becomes visible because it was a raw file. If I open that up as a JPEG, let me see how if I can get that out. I don't think I will be able to. So 52. So here is a JPEG. And if I just do, we'll just say brightness contrast. It's totally different. I'm getting some of that down here, but it's nowhere near the same as I had before with the raw file. So basically the raw file captured all the light down here where the JPEG didn't. Okay, and it's pretty obvious when you look at the file size, there's something different, right? This is 4 megs and this is 20 megs. There's something different. What is it? The difference is all the data that the raw file captured. And like I said, most of the higher end cameras, whether they're single lens reflect like mine or the mirrorless, have that, and they're starting to do it on the phones. I think there's some software you can add that kind of does it. It's not really there, but it's getting there. Ultimately, you're going to be able to save or shoot raw with your camera phones. Again, the problem is they're big files and they take up a lot of space. And if you're like me, you've got 30,000 pictures on your damn camera. I got 28 now. I downloaded some. It's just going to fill up really quick. But if you have a choice between shooting JPEG or RAW, shoot RAW. If you can shoot both, shoot both. It's fine. It's not hurting anything. But the RAW gives you so much more flexibility down the line. And you want that, right? Because you're there, you're shooting. It's not like you can go back tomorrow half the time and shoot this stuff. Now, if it's you're shooting a vase of flowers on a table, obviously you can shoot that again. But in this case, you're traveling to Washington D.C. and you're taking pictures. You can't. That's the gun that killed President Lincoln. Crazy. You can see that. That's a bad picture. Let's see if I got it in focus.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts. This is the actual gun that focus.
Sounds kind of creepy, but
It is creepy.
I bet there's like remnants of Lincoln's blood on there or something.
There's a pillow. There's like let me see if I can find it. It's like this is like Ford's Theater. It's just so you guys know, this has all been rebuilt. The whole building, the inside was basically torn down. It was kind of nuts. It's a bad picture, but there's basically the discoloration is from the president's head. Not to be discussed in here, but
I heard he didn't even like die instantly.
no, he didn't. It was hours later. They took him across. They took him across the street to the house across the street here. I just showed it. So this is the theater. The outside's the same. The inside, like I said, it's been rebuilt. And he died in this house across the street. So
That's a bad way to go.
So, but it's history, right? I mean, it's just kind of fascinating. I love history and kind of, I'm not there for the glory. I'm just there for the history of it all. But it's a beautiful, and it's been rebuilt. It's built just the way it was, or pretty close to be back in the day. It does have they actually do plays here. They were setting up for a play, so they still do stuff. No one sits here in the presidential box, of course, but you can go and see shows there still. At one point, after the assassination of Lincoln, it became an office building, a government office. There was a floor at one all the way across, and it just became kind of an office building. And then that kind of got demolished, and they brought it back to a theater. And now,
when was it rebuilt?
Yeah, the inside's been completely rebuilt. Yeah, I didn't know that either. It's like it totally been rebuilt.
Did they tell you when that happened? Was it like
I think it was I want to say the 1920s, 10s, somewhere in that time period. I think early 1900s. It literally was like a government office building for a while. Just because the guy that ran the theater didn't want it to be a theater anymore and went out of business. There's obviously the secondary history of the building. And now it's back to a working theater where they do plays and performances. And it's a national park site where there's a museum in the basement. And then you can actually walk around the building itself. It's very interesting to see these places that history took place in. I mean, you read about it and you see stuff on TV, but to actually physically be there, it's kind of cool. And this is the archives. You can't take pictures inside the archives of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, but trust me, they're in there and you can see them. And this is just the mall, Capitol. It's just pictures I took. So anyway, we'll play with those. All right. Questions? Okay, so homework for the weekend, we'll call it that. Watch the video and continue to play with the girl in Italy, right? I want you just to kind of get to a point where you're very comfortable with it. You think it looks good. You've taken out the elements that aren't needed. You've cleaned up you know, the stones and the dirt that's in there and the manhole cover, you know, maybe taking out the police van, those kind of things. So I want, again, just get comfortable with it, because as we start to build into compositing starting next week, you're going to want to be able to do those things kind of secondhand. Okay. And then open up the raw file. Like I said, there's 2 of them on the website. So just open those up and kind of look at that, and then start to save things kind of as a smart object. So you can work with those. Again, we'll work more with those next week as we do a compositing exercise, and I will upload some photos to the website, so we'll all have the kind of similar pictures to work with. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Questions? Yes, no, maybe. Who's still awake? Yes. Am I muted? Am I here? Am I here?
Here.
Okay.
Thank you for that wake up call.
What's that?
Thank you for the wake up call.
You think? Okay. Get one of those air horns, make noise.
Oh gosh, please don't.
Wake everybody up. All right, questions about smart objects we kind of did today? We deal with raw files. Again, we're working layers, of course, and then we're gonna start to build all this into compositing. Okay, so we're making adjustments and making new things out of old things, which is going to tie into the first project. Head start. The first project is we're going to work on making some record covers. So everybody, I think, everybody likes music, so we'll get the parameters, but you can let your head start to spin and imagine like record albums and what kind of craziness would you do on a record album. Okay, so that's going to be kind of the first project. All right, anything else?
As of right now, no assignments, just you want us to exercise that
just
smart object.
correct. Just exercise. Yep.
Good.
So open the raw file that's on the website, work on the girl in Italy, work with smart objects, converting those things to smart objects. Again, just kind of getting used to where do I go, and because I know it's like you're like, where is this, right? Like, well, he showed me, where was it? It just takes time, and I want to kind of build up that memory with your hand and your eye, and so you kind of know where to go. You don't have to spend 3 hours to find it. Okay, so that just becomes with practice, and that practice is just you guys were opening files and pictures and doing things. Okay, and it'll get there. And like I said, by the time we get to the next couple of weeks, it's going to be second nature, and that's what I want. All right, anything else? All right, guys, have an awesome weekend. If you have questions, let me know. And it'll be up on Zoom. Okay, bad internet connection. Don't worry about it. I'll get the recording saved up.